Okay, in this, the second part of our investigation of visual perception, we're going to be looking at the software as opposed to the hardware, which we discussed in part one. And this investigation will throw some light on what is understood by the box in the oft quoted phrase, think outside the box. If we think of the software as the ideas and influences that we gain from culture, a good way of thinking about those is to use the metaphor of glasses or lenses that are colored in a particular way. And what they do is they give a certain flavor to the things we look at. They appear to be a certain way. So the ideas, the software that we've downloaded into our brain through growing up, from our culture, from our friends, from our family, from the media, all of these influences all sort of conspire and come together. And they really have an exceptionally strong influence on how we see the things in our world and how we think about the things in our world. And so, one way this makes itself known is through cultural symbols, cultural ideas, cultural representations, and something specifically known as conventions, particular ways of doing things that are accepted within a particular culture, that for the most part, many of us consider them to be natural, the way things are, not usually something we think of as being constructed. A really good example is this. If I asked you what's wrong with this image, most people would say it's upside down. But if you take a minute and think about it, can a map be upside down? Can it really be an upside down view of the world? Because it presupposes the idea that there is a correct way, that there is an up and a down that is correct and natural. But if we think about our planet spinning around on its axis in the solar system, in the galaxy, in the universe, there really is no proper orientation for up. There's no up in the universe. Um, yes, there are axes, a northern axis that we call it, a southern axis, but what gets to be up and what gets to be down is completely arbitrary in the sense that it's decided by culture rather than nature. And so this image, and another version of it, which I have in my office, is unusual to us. That's all it is. It's unfamiliar. It's not incorrect. It's not wrong. It's just another way of looking at the world, but a way that many of us, except Australians perhaps, are unfamiliar with. We don't normally see the world represented this way. And for obvious reasons. Traditional map makers, in terms of the first people to circumnavigate the globe and draw the map, came from this part of the planet, Europe. So naturally, they put themselves close to the middle and close to the top, for obviously psychological reasons. But maps have been made by many countries, China, the Middle East, all over the world for millennia. And the idea of having north at the top was not a given fact. Often we would find the south at the top or the east at the top in sort of Christian maps or certain Mediterranean maps. There was no top or bottom. You just oriented the direction of the map based on where you were located around the Mediterranean. So a map is a really good way of thinking about this. The map, the often quoted phrase, the map is not the territory. It's a way of representing the territory. It's a way of thinking about things. Really applies to many of the ideas, beliefs, and interpretations that we use. Another example of cultural conventions is this. So my question to you is, who is this man? And if you want to stop the video and think about it for a second, please go ahead. Okay, so if you thought about it, many of you might have said this is Jesus, and if you did, you'd have been correct. This is an image compiled by forensic anthropologists, computer scientists, and artists of what Jesus probably looked like as a man living in the Middle East 2 millennia ago, based on skin tone, bone structure, hairstyles, things like that. So this is a closer image to what Jesus might have looked like, though we don't know exactly what he looked like. But if we think about the representations of Jesus, we can see how culturally constructed they are. The Chinese Jesus on the left, very Western European blue-eyed Caucasian Jesus, an Ethiopian black Jesus, and then the forensic image. And so, as young people growing up in such societies, these are the images we're subjected to. These are the images we grow up with. And we very often take them to be reality. But so much of what we get culturally is actually constructed, meaning it's made by people at a particular time and at a particular place. And it's not something we think about that much unless it's pointed out to us or unless there's some kind of conflict with different types of representations. And so if we think about the lenses and the ideas that we have, it brings up a really interesting point about how do we access the world. And by world, I mean the people we encounter, the events we're a part of, the places we see, either firsthand or secondhand through other people or through media. How do we encounter the world? Do we encounter it directly? Do we have direct access to what really is going on out there? In other words, is it true? Or do we have an interpretation? Is everything an interpretation? And for our purposes, I will put to you the idea that everything is an interpretation. Um, Not at a very physical level. If you break your leg, that's not an interpretation. But the way we think about things, the attitudes that we have towards things, the beliefs that we construct, the opinions that we make, are not necessarily accurate reflections of the way things are. They're based on um, this intermediary kind of layer between us and the world. So let's unpack some of those. So one of the most obvious ones is family. Your experience of your family and growing up has furnished you with enormous amounts of software that have an influence on how you think about people, the world, relationships. Whether you're a single child or whether you're one of 12, you will have very, very different ideas about what it means to share or to get food, hand-me-downs, your parents' attention, whether you come from a single parent, two parents, or an extended family with lots and lots of aunties and uncles. All of these things will have a huge influence on the way that you grow up, the way that you think about things, and the way that you see things. Your work, the kind of job that you do, your career, again, has an enormous influence in what you see. And this can be very, very physical. Let's say you're looking at a mountain full of evergreens, lots and lots of trees, and you're an ecologist. Well, what do you see when you look at that mountain? Well, you see habitats, you see biodiversity, you see ecological systems within systems. You see this rich, diverse, complex array of natural relationships. If, on the other hand, you're a property developer, you might look at this very same mountain and you might see ching ching, profit, money, lumber, land, views, tourism, whatever. So you can look at the exact same thing, but by virtue of your work that you're doing, what you're actually seeing is going to be very, very different. Religious, whether you're religious or not, and what kind of religion. Whether it's an orthodox fundamentalist or whether it's much more liberal and easygoing, will have a huge effect on how you view other people. And human history is just a really good source book if you wanted to actually see how that plays out. Race, a huge factor in not only how you see things, but just as importantly, how other people see you and how that has an effect on your beliefs and your ideas. So you can see this is a two-way street. It's not just you're preloaded with software that makes you see things in a certain way. Your ideas and your thoughts and your beliefs condition also how people respond to you and how the world comes to meet you. It also has a lot to do with not only just what you see, but what you don't see. So if you see things in a particular way, you're also going to be biased to not seeing things that counteract or conflict with that. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the course. Male, female, gender. Do men and women, for instance, do they see the world fundamentally differently? Some people would say yes, it's a biological, genetic thing. Other people would say, no, it's socially constructed. And others would say, well, even if it is socially constructed, it's true. It has an effect. Women are just treated differently. And as a result, women see differently. They act differently. We don't need to get into the nitty gritty of, how true or untrue this is. We can just take on board the idea that, yeah, it probably has a huge influence in terms of, the lenses with which you see things. Your socioeconomic status. How wealthy are you? What do you have access to in terms of your money? What kind of stressors do you have in your life as a result of that? Social status, all of these things. Your peers, huge influence. Who do you hang around with? Where do your ideas are shaped largely by the people around you because they share the ideas. And one of the biggest mistakes we can make is always believe that our friends are right simply because we like them. But that happens all the time. Someone that we like tells us something, we often accept it uncritically. Someone we don't like tells us something, we have a very different attitude towards it. So our peers are shaping our outlook at a very conscious but also unconscious level all the time. I think probably one of the biggest factors would be the media. How do you know what's going on in the world? How do you know about current events? How do you know what's happening out there? Well, depending on what source of media you derive your information from, you're going to have a very particular viewpoint. Now, I'm not arguing truth or false. I'm just saying that it's particular. It's true. Um, what the media will do is it'll choose to show you certain things, but it also chooses not to show you other things. So you're never going to get the full picture from the media. You're always going to get a prepackaged interpretation of what they want you to see. And very often in today's climate, that's marketed and sold to you because you're seen as a client. So you're basically choosing media outlets and sources which confirm your ideas and beliefs, and they know that, so their job is literally to confirm those ideas and beliefs, and you get this kind of feedback loop. But the problem is we would then mistake it for somehow getting the truth. You know, that the media is bringing us this kind of unvarnished, unfiltered, unspun version of what happened or what someone's doing in terms of the world and events. And it's important to know that that's never the case. That's never true. So what we have here is a whole collection of influences, of things that we've grown up with, we've taken on board, we've grown into, we've encountered in our life, things that we've maybe changed our ideas about. But all of this together makes a very, very strong case that our access to the world is not direct. We don't see things in an uninterpreted sort of way. And one way to talk about this collection of lenses and filters and ideas and beliefs is simply to call it our box. This is our box. Yeah, when we say think outside the box, one way of thinking about that phrase is to think about it this way. Our box filters our experience. And one way to say that, that's often used in discussions, is that our experience is mediated. It's never direct. It always comes through a particular lens or way of looking at things. And the problem with our box, or one of the problems with our box, is that it's very comfortable. We like it. We like our ideas. We like our habits. We like our beliefs. We get security from it. We get a sense of identity from it. It becomes habitual. It becomes second nature. And this is why it's so hard to see. Like the map, like the picture of Jesus, it becomes second nature that we no longer question it. And that's where the problem comes from this. And so our thinking becomes likewise habitual, patterned, automatic, quick, fixed. And so to think outside the box really is to step outside our way of looking at the world, to risk, to go beyond comfort and security, to go to an uncomfortable place so that we could gain other ways of looking at the world, ways that might contradict or challenge what we already have in our box, or ways that might expand our box. So if we look at the question, can we ever access the world directly? the answer is probably no. Most psychologists and thinkers and social scientists would say absolutely not. Some religious practitioners might have a very different point of view. But regardless of that, if we just take the idea that no, we're always going to have some degree of interpretation. The question is, well, what can we do about the box? And the answer is to step outside of it. And how do we step outside? We step outside by expanding our box, by making our box better, by developing and bringing in new perspectives that might come from books that we've read, movies we've seen, art, music. Travel's a huge one. When we go to other places and we eat differently, we dress differently, and we sleep and talk and interact with people very differently, we realize, that our way of doing things is simply that. It's a way of doing things. It's not the way of doing things. And so what we really want to do with our box is interrogate it. Take what's not serving us, what's problematic, what's we know is inaccurate or a holdover from old patterns of thinking, and get rid of them. But at the same time, expand the box by bringing in new perspectives, having new experiences that give us different ways of engaging with the world and expanding our repertoire of responses to the world. So the object is to recognize that you have a box, that you have all of these things. And there's a world of difference between the person who knows that their experience is mediated, that knows that their background, their culture, their family, their peers, their ideas have created interpretive lenses through which to see the world. There's a world of difference between that person and somebody who's unaware of that, who thinks that they have direct access to the world, because that person's dangerous. That person, when they see something or think something or feel something, easily makes the mistake that it's accurate, it's true, it's right, it's the way it is. Those people are this way. This event means this. And so you have a very unself-critical awareness of oneself and the world. And that's where we get stereotyping. That's where we get brutality. That's where we get inhumanity between people. And so looking at our box, thinking about our box is a very, very useful tool for self-understanding, as is the whole idea of trying to develop our box and expand it by new perspectives.